Hello trainers, and welcome to the making of the thumbnail for Gastly. So this was the first episode for the Halloween series of last year. And it was a whole little anthology of a Gastly that starts feeding on your soul and gradually evolves between each of the little dream sequences. So for this one, I did a lot of experiments with texturing. There were so many texture experiments going on. Some of it stuff I already knew how to do, some of it just figuring out how to do it. Starting with the basics of my signature eyes and doing the little fangy smile. I think I do have a Your Character Here commission available with this Gastly. And I think what I'll do for the face next time, because I didn't add them in, is those little like tired lines and accent lines that are around the mouth and eyes. But for this thumbnail, I didn't have them because I got so wrapped up in the experiments. So the first bit of effect was with the mouth. I like to use the gradient circle to get the shading in the mouth. And then Ghastly is just at its core, literally a big black orb. So I kept that as the dark thing because I wanted it to remain kind of menacing. But then I will be using my Ditto Pink on the gas later. And moving on to the bed frame, I'm using this mostly as like a benchmark for my layering to figure out the reference sizes for everything. Eventually I will enlarge that bedpost eventually. For the bed set itself, I went with a kind of cabin cozy feel because it's turning into a cold environment, and I'm drawn to making green comfy blankets because I used to have a thick, heavy green comforter for most of my life. I do still have it, but it just, in my brain, has become synonymous with comfy. I drew out the raised elements of leggies and little tootsies. So I'm doing the shading here. Unfortunately, most of this shading, since I didn't go too heavy with it, will kind of get lost in the pattern, but I am still happy I did it because it gave me a nice map of where the curves are. I even have the indent for in between the valley of the feet. So not a terribly big figure. And then I wanted to make it kind of quilty, because I love quilty blankets. That's just a personal taste. If you do take up the Your Character Here $20 commission, I would be willing to do almost any bed set as long as it's, like, not some, like, fourth dimensional design or practically, hey, draw my character also on the blanket, unless you want, like, a really simplified version. I started by mapping out with these checkered patterns. I won't be sticking with this pattern, but this is definitely where the experiments were mostly taking off, trying to figure out how to map the quilt effect. Next time, I'm definitely going to start with outlining the grid pattern and then adding the design, but I wanted to experiment to see if possibly I could jump the gun a bit, and it turns out no. So some of those long lines, the pattern lines, are definitely closer together, indicating the height of the mound on the legs, and then the cross ones would more so follow the curvy pattern that is occurring. I also really wanted to try to avoid, it always bothers me in some animations seeing complex patterns or tight patterns not actually following the flow of the clothes. It's very clear it's like a one layer static pattern, and then it almost just looks like a little window of the character's outfits moving over that pattern rather than the pattern moving with the fabric. That personally bothers me. I can't unnotice it. it's never a deal breaker, but it itches me. It itches me. So this is where I start actually drawing out the hard imprints of the patchwork, because looking at it just plainly, it's hard to read. And again, these thumbnails are very small, so you're practically looking at it from far away. So the harsher lines and outlines really help. I did end up making the one leg a little taller than the other, but for all we know, the foot's at an angle. It doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical. If anything, I think it might have looked odder if it was. It's also why it's like I did notice I didn't have Gastly's face dead center, but I kind of like the slight tilt. Because it's like a little more subtly coy to me. Yeah, outlining the little tootsies. And then looking at it, I'm realizing it bothers me that the pattern isn't actually in checkerboard. Like the pattern, whoops. What happened there was I'm texturing the green blanket because once again, I love render clouds. I swear it is my golden tool. And so for the kind of more fabric-y feeling, I use render clouds. And I'm noticing that checkerboard pattern has a lot of problems with the way that I did it. Because not only is it only in the straight lines, so I don't get that actual checkerboard feeling of the patchwork, but also with the colors that I'm using, with the texturing, it makes it disappear completely. So I'm going back, I'm selecting them all, kind of going the long route, and then I start experimenting with patterns. Once again, I start avoiding the checkerboard because it very much has that pattern, that problem that I don't like, where it's obviously not following the flow of the fabric. And I went with the little like arrow pattern. I forget what it was called, but it feels a lot more quilty to me. And then I start playing with the headboard. I had a series of blurs that I had done that did a really nice wood effect, but unfortunately I did that like years ago. So you see me here kind of flailing at it, trying to remember how the heck I did it, and I eventually don't, and I start getting tired, and it's like, whatever. I believe I eventually just go with a solid pattern, but I do darken it because I do want it to be a dark cabiny wood. So yeah, playing with patterns there, and I went with the more kind of platy pattern, and then I make the bedposts thicker so it doesn't look like a matchbox bed. Yeah, and making those thicker, making it even, making the wood a bit more dark so that it has more of that cabin feel, kind of like a haunted cabin in the woods type of feel, because again, this is the first episode for the Halloween series. And then the more fun part of playing with the gas. So I drew it out with the lasso tool, kind of vague wibbly wobblies, the lower ones looking more tendrily, and then I spawn cotton candy. Using the rendered clouds and then a Gaussian blur. I would say that's probably my second favorite tool. It's the Gaussian blur, and then making it slightly translucent because this is the gas from Gastly. I realized I didn't like the full head just being there. I like the feeling a bit more if it's like peeking up from the foot of the bed. Unfortunately, I didn't have my layers prepared for that, so I have to go back to every individual layer and erase what I did. It was a bit of a risk, but I think it paid off very well. And I even went above the headboard so it looks more like the gas is cascading away from Gastly and reaching up. Taking the original color to use for the background still, and then using the gradient with the secondary color being completely translucent, so it has that more creepy spotlight feel. And then I still prefer my method of making the solid color and then like reverse painting, like paint erasing to give it that nice gradient so the softer gas tendrils are reaching for you, because in the episode you're basically getting softly fumigated. And then adding the DDD and the number for the episode. I do also add the Ditto Shine to the orb. I initially didn't. One, because I was so overwhelmed with the texturing that I was doing, and then once I had it done, it's like, good enough. But then when I go on to the next thumbnail, I realized I forgot the shine, so I went back and added it, which you can now see here. And that is Gastly. I think it turned out pretty fun. And once again, I do have a commission option if you would like a character of yours or a figure to be being oh so lovingly suffocated by this ghostly Pokemon as it starts to feed on your life essence. You can find that on either my Subscribestar or my Patreon, or see the image sampling on Fur Affinity. My link tree has all of the links for whatever your preference may be. I thank you very much for joining us for this episode, and I will see you for the next catch. Bye-bye.